Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are right now. Welcome back to Sip and Talk.
Welcome, welcome. It is so good to be here.
So before we get into the heavy stuff today, you were telling me something earlier that just made me laugh. You actually managed to double book an international flight.
Oh, don't even get me started. My head is still spinning. I was confirming the tickets, right?
No.
And my internet just lagged for a second.
Oh, no.
So I clicked confirm again. And now I have two completely identical, totally non-refundable tickets for the exact same seat on the exact same flight.
Yeah.
I created this double obligation where only one was needed.
That is actually the perfect segue because your accidental double confirmation headache, it brings us right to the middle of this huge international issue. The legal black hole around the 1951 Treaty of San Francisco, the SF Treaty. It's this double consequence problem that's giving Beijing a massive, massive diplomatic migraine right now.
I think I know what you're getting at. You mean that joke that was going viral online a little while ago?
Maybe.
You know, China, the PRC, is so fiercely rejecting the SF Treaty, saying it's invalid.
Yeah.
And the response from tons of people in Taiwan was just, wait a minute, if the treaty is void, doesn't that mean Taiwan technically goes back to Japan?
That's the one. And, you know, it starts as this online joke, but it's not trivial at all. It's actually a really sophisticated logical test of the PRC's entire diplomatic story.
Right.
So many of our listeners have asked us to break this down, this exact logical failure. If the PRC successfully negates the SF Treaty, they are, in effect, voiding the one international legal tool that made Japan surrender Taiwan.
And if that surrender is voided, well, logic just forces you to go back to the last valid, legally binding agreement about Taiwan sovereignty.
Which was signed way, way back in 1895.
Right.
Which leads to this completely astonishing conclusion, the PRC's own legal stance, the one designed to lock in their claim. It actually, paradoxically, provides the strongest possible argument for Taiwan's sovereignty to revert right back to Japan.
It's such a spectacular case of logical self-sabotage.
It is, and it's what sparked that incredible joke, you know? The Communist Party accidentally handed Taiwan's sovereignty back to Tokyo.
The irony is just, it's breathtaking. But we also have to talk about the even deeper flaw here.
Okay.
Even if we just, for a moment, accept the premise that Taiwan was returned to China, it wasn't returned to the current government, the CCP.
That's the second fatal legal flaw, isn't it? The inheritance problem.
Exactly.
When Beijing says they are the only legitimate successor to all the sovereign rights of China, they're sort of hoping everyone just ignores a huge historical fact.
And a core principle of international law on state succession, it's the ultimate legal loophole. One of our listeners put it so brilliantly.
Oh, yeah.
They said, you want to inherit your father's estate, but your father, the Republic of China, the ROC, is still alive.
Wow.
He's fully functioning, democratic, and, still governing his territory.
I couldn't have said it better. The simple, undeniable fact that the ROC is alive and well just creates this massive roadblock for the PRC's whole succession claim. And that really is the core of the Taiwan Strait issue. It's not a simple inheritance case. It's this ongoing, contest between historical legal principles and political on-the-ground reality.
So for our talk today, we've got a huge mission. We're going to unpack this whole diplomatic and legal drama.
Right.
We'll look at the self-sabotage with the SF Treaty rejection, the whole father versus son inheritance problem, and the just bizarre outcomes of trying to rewrite the post-war order.
And, of course, as is tradition here, we're going to run our listener favorite thought experiments.
My favorite part.
We'll look at the real-world costs and benefits of two hypotheticals. What if Taiwan actually belonged to Japan? And on the other hand, what if it belonged to the PRC? We're going to try and figure out the real value of the status quo by looking at those two extremes.
Okay, so today's title, did China just hand Taiwan's sovereignty back to Japan? Let's get into this legal black hole and all the paradoxes inside.
Let's do it.
Okay, so let's start at the very beginning of this legal knot.
Right, the 1951 Treaty of San Francisco. Why does the PRC have such a big problem with it? Why do they need to reject this, foundational document of the post-war order in Asia?
It really boils down to three main pillars, three arguments, and they're all designed to delegitimize the treaty, at least when it comes to any territory China claims.
Okay, so let's take the first argument. This is the non-signatory status, right? This one seems pretty straightforward.
It is. This one is the most factual and probably the easiest to get your head around.
Okay.
The fact is, the SF Treaty was signed by 48 of the Allied nations, in September 1951. But neither the PRC, which had just been established on the mainland,
right, in 49,
nor the ROC, which had retreated to Taiwan, were invited to the conference.
And that wasn't just an accident, right? They didn't just forget to send an invitation.
Not at all. It was because of a huge international disagreement, mainly between the U.S. and the U.K., over who was the legitimate government of China.
Was it the communists in Beijing or the nationalists in Taipei?
Exactly. And because they couldn't agree, they just left the seat for China empty.
So what happened then?
The ROC later signed its own separate peace treaty with Japan, the Treaty of Taipei, in 1952. But the PRC immediately claimed that since they were the main allied power that fought Japan,
and suffered the most casualties,
by far, they argued their exclusion makes the entire treaty illegal and invalid, especially concerning Chinese territory.
And they have a legal principle for that, right?
They do. They cite a very real principle of international law. It's a Latin phrase, pacta tertius nec prosunt.
Okay, stop it. Which basically means
a treaty can't create obligations or rights for a third party without their consent.
So their logic is, we didn't sign it, we didn't agree to it, so you can't use it to give away territory we claim.
That's their simple, strong case.
Mm-hmm.
But in international law, there's a counterargument.
Of course there is.
Especially for these huge foundational peace treaties after a world war, there's a concept of erga omnes obligations. Obligations owed to the entire international community. Many legal experts argue that setting up a definitive post-war framework, which is what the SF Treaty did, carries that kind of universal weight.
Regardless of who signed.
Right. Especially when you're dealing with the breakup of a defeated empire.
That's a really critical distinction. So the PRC treats it like it's some standard trade deal, but the rest of the world sees it as, like, the foundation of a new global order.
Precisely. Which brings us to their second pillar of argument.
Violation of war declarations.
This is where things get more political.
The
PRC claimed the treaty violated the 1942 Declaration by United Nations.
And what was that?
It was essentially a solidarity pact. All the Allied powers promised they would not sign a separate one-sided peace deal with any of the enemy nations.
And the PRC sees the SF Treaty as exactly that.
Exactly that. A separate peace, signed mainly by the U.S. and its Western allies, specifically designed to, marginalize and exclude the new communist state.
So they don't see it as a legitimate act of law. They see it as a hostile diplomatic move against the new China.
Right. It allows them to frame the whole thing not just as legally flawed, but as morally and politically illegitimate. A Cold War power play, not a real peace settlement.
And that sets the stage for their third and probably most important argument.
The most critical one, yeah. The supposed contradiction with the wartime political pledges.
This is where the 1943 Cairo Declaration and the 1945 Potsdam Proclamation come in.
This is the absolute core of their positive claim. It's the whole basis for why they believe Taiwan already belongs to them. They insist the real legal foundation for Taiwan's return are these two political documents.
Let's look at the language there. The Cairo Declaration, right, that was Roosevelt, Churchill, and Chiang Kai-shek. It said all territories Japan had taken from China, including Formosa and the Pescadores,
Taiwan and Penghu,
should be restored to the Republic of China. And Potsdam basically said the same thing.
And the key phrase there, which the PRC absolutely loves, is that explicit statement of return. They argue this was a binding promise made by the victors.
Okay. But now we have to look at the SF Treaty's language, because this is where the ambiguity and all the trouble really starts.
It is. Article 2B of the treaty is incredibly short. It just says, Japan renounces all right, title and claim to Formosa and the Pescadores.
And that's it.
That's it.
Notice what's missing there.
The verb, yeah. It says Japan gives them up, but it doesn't say who they're giving them up to.
So it just makes the territory legally ownerless. Japan just abandons it.
Exactly. And the PRC's argument is that this ambiguity can't possibly overwrite the super clear promises from Cairo and Potsdam.
Their claim is that Taiwan was already recovered and restored to China back in 1945.
Through military administration by the ROC.
Right, so the SF Treaty's vague language from 1951 doesn't even matter because their sovereignty was already established.
That's their argument. Now, let's flip it. Let's look at why most of the world and most international legal experts outside Beijing really push back on this.
And why the PRC's rejection of the treaty ends up backfiring so badly.
It all comes down to something called treaty hierarchy.
This is the legal foundation of the whole post-war order, right? And it's why wartime promises are treated differently than a formal signed and sealed peace treaty.
Precisely. International law generally holds that a formal multilateral peace treaty, which is ratified by dozens of countries and sets actual borders, carries way more legal weight than wartime political statements.
So Cairo and Potsdam were, statements of intent during the war?
Exactly. While the SF Treaty was the actual legal instrument designed to settle the war's aftermath.
Intent versus instrument, that's the key distinction.
It is.
A political promise about where a property should go is not the same as the final, legally binding deed that actually transfers the property.
And because the SF Treaty chose that very specific, ambiguous language, just abandoning sovereignty, not transferring it to anyone, not even the ROC, it became the exact legal foundation for that infamous phrase.
Taiwan status undecided. Those three words are what the PRC absolutely cannot stand.
Because if Taiwan's status is undecided, it means the international framework allows for the Taiwanese people to have a say in their own future.
And it lets other countries like the US and Japan keep a vested interest in the region's stability because legally its fate isn't settled.
So the PRC's recent diplomatic push to declare the SF Treaty invalid. It's a very deliberate political move.
They're trying to destabilize the entire post-war legal framework.
Yes. By relying only on the political claims of Cairo and Potsdam, they try to just leapfrog the whole status undecided debate and cement their political doctrine. Taiwan must belong to the PRC.
But this is where we get to the ultimate paradox, the Japan trap. If the PRC is successful, if they somehow convince the world the SF Treaty is void, at least regarding Taiwan, we have to follow that logic to its conclusion.
And if the SF Treaty is void, then Japan's legal obligation to surrender Taiwan is also void. The surrender isn't legally binding anymore.
So if you void the surrender, you're left with this giant legal black hole. And to fill it, you have to go back to the last valid ratified treaty that actually governed Taiwan's legal status. And what was that?
That would be the 1895 Treaty of Shimonoseki,
which formally ceded Taiwan in perpetuity from the Qing dynasty to the Empire of Japan.
In perpetuity is the key phrase there, a permanent transfer.
The political irony is just staggering in their rush to get rid of the status undecided argument.
They inadvertently make the strongest possible legal case for Taiwan's status to technically revert right back to Japanese sovereignty.
They are confirming the joke. They're using this complex legal tool to get a political goal, but the tool is booby-trapped. They're accidentally handing Japan the legal keys to Taiwan's sovereignty.
It's the ultimate lesson in unintended consequences.
Okay, let's shift gears now. Let's move away from the Japan paradox for a second and look at the other huge legal hole in the PRC's entire story.
The fact that the Republic of China is still around. Vibrantly so.
This is what we're calling the state succession challenge.
Right. It's the legal theory for how one country takes on the rights, obligations, and territories of a former country. The PRC's whole claim is that they are the sole successor to all the rights of China after the Civil War.
And on the surface, that sounds kind of simple, right? A country changes its name or its government. The new one gets the assets and the debts of the old one.
It sounds simple, but it gets incredibly complicated when the old state doesn't actually disappear.
And that is the crucial difference here. State succession really only works smoothly when the predecessor state ceases to exist.
Right. Think of the Soviet Union. It legally dissolved, and Russia was accepted as the main successor state, or when two countries merge.
But what happened in 1949 wasn't a dissolution or a merger. It was a civil war.
And it resulted in two competing governments, both claiming to be the legitimate government of China.
And this is the giant obstacle for the PRC's claim. The Republic of China, the ROC.
The government that signed the wartime declarations, that governed China until 1949, and that officially administered Taiwan from 1945.
It still exists. It has an effective military, a complex diplomatic network, and fully functioning government institutions.
So the PRC is forced into this really tough spot. Their whole succession claim depends on the idea that the ROC legally vanished in 1949.
The second the PRC was founded, they claim the ROC just stopped being a subject of international law.
And to make that claim, they have to rely on some older, less accepted theories of what makes a state a state.
Can you just quickly break those down for us?
Sure. So historically, there are two main theories. The declaratory theory says a state exists as soon as it meets certain criteria like effective government, a defined territory, a population. And recognition by other states is just a political thumbs up, not a legal requirement.
Okay. And the other one?
The constitutive theory says a state's existence is actually created or constituted by the recognition of other countries.
So how does the PRC's claim fit in here?
The PRC has to argue that they instantly became the only legitimate state of China in 1949, no matter how many other countries still recognize the ROC.
So they're relying on the declaratory theory to say the ROC legally disappeared.
But the problem is, the ROC continues to show all the de facto signs of being a state on Taiwan. It has effective governance, a defined territory, a population.
So its continued physical existence and its evolution into this vibrant democracy just completely messes with the idea of a simple state succession.
Let's go back to our listeners' powerful analogy, the inheritance fight. The PRC is demanding the inheritance Taiwan. But the ROC, the predecessor state, the father in this story, is still alive. He's actively managing the assets, collecting taxes, and electing new managers every 4 years.
If you try to claim an estate and the original owner is still standing right there arguing with you, it's not a simple legal transaction anymore.
Exactly. It stops being a peaceful legal transfer, like passing a land deed in a courtroom.
And it becomes,
by its very nature, a political and military conflict, a forced takeover. The only way the PRC can solve this state succession problem is through the complete physical elimination of the other successor, the ROC.
And this is where we see the ultimate political purpose behind all these legal games. The aggressive push to negate the SF Treaty, to rely only on the Cairo Declaration, and to push this inheritance narrative. All of it is focused on supporting one single, non-negotiable political doctrine.
Taiwan is an inalienable part of the People's Republic of China.
It's not law leading to policy.
It's policy dictating the law. They're building the legal argument around the political goal they've already decided on.
Which is why the arguments, when you really look at them under a microscope, they contain these spectacular contradictions.
Like the Japan trap.
Okay. We've established the incredibly shaky legal ground here. So now let's explore the human consequences if one of these shaky outcomes actually happened.
Let's start with the most spectacular one, the Japan trap.
Let's assume the impossible. Let's say a global legal consensus forms, maybe because of the PRC's own arguments, that the post-war status is void.
And the 1895 Treaty of Shimonoseki is the last legally sound transfer.
Imagine a modern, peaceful transition in 2025. Taiwan becomes a prefecture of Japan, maybe Japan's 6th major island.
Tokyo's subtropical gateway. I like the sound of that.
It has a nice ring to it. Now, first, we have to acknowledge the cultural starting point. This isn't a hostile takeover.
Not at all. Taiwan has huge pro-Japan sentiment. Surveys consistently show over 80% positive views.
And there are incredibly strong existing ties, from shared culture, architecture, a history of mutual trust, especially during disaster relief.
It would be a culturally friendly merger, even if politically traumatic.
So let's dive in. First, welfare and social costs. This would be a massive upgrade, but a very expensive one.
Let's start with the good stuff, the tangible benefits. Taiwanese citizens would instantly be integrated into Japan's social security system,
which is incredibly comprehensive and technologically advanced.
The stability boost would be huge. Taiwan would get access to Japan's world-famous universal healthcare system. But even more importantly, they'd get access to Kaigo Hoken,
Japan's long-term care insurance system.
Arguably the most robust system in the world for taking care of an aging population.
And that's critical because Taiwan is aging super fast. Their life expectancy is already high, around 81.
Right, but integrating into Japan's system could push that even higher, using their specialized elderly care and community networks.
And what about the demographic crisis? Taiwan's birth rate is dangerously low, about 1.08.
Japan, despite its own problems, has really powerful family welfare benefits. We're talking monthly allowances, great parental leave policies, childcare subsidies.
So integrating those could give an immediate lift to Taiwan's struggling families.
But every massive upgrade comes with a massive bill.
And Taiwan has had a relatively low-tax environment for decades. That would end overnight.
The shock to the wallet would be instant. Taiwanese citizens would get hit with Japan's notoriously high taxes.
We're talking a mandatory 10% consumption tax on everything, high local taxes.
And especially those steep social insurance rates that can eat up to 30% of your income.
That's the high cost of high stability. Even the healthcare system would get more expensive for individuals.
Right. Taiwan's current system is famous for super low copays. You pay a tiny fee and that's it.
But under the Japanese system, standard copays are around 30%.
For anyone with a chronic illness or who needs frequent care, that is a substantial change.
And you're merging two highly aged societies. Taiwan joining Japan doesn't solve Japan's pension crisis.
It just adds Taiwan to it.
So Taiwanese citizens might see their working lives get even longer as Japan keeps pushing back their retirement age to keep the system afloat.
So the takeaway is a massive trade-off. Social support quality goes way, way up, but the financial burden on the individual gets exponentially higher.
High quality, high cost. Okay, let's talk economy. This would be transformative.
Taiwan's high-tech sector, especially TSMC, the undisputed king of global chip manufacturing, would be reinforced by Japan's huge national R&D budget.
And crucially, TSMC would be fully brought into the U.S.-Japan supply chain security framework.
That's not just economic, that's geopolitical protection. Its factories would be seen as essential to Japan's national defense. That guarantees massive investment.
It's fun to imagine the rebranding. Would it be Nihon Seki Den Japan Chip Power?
Maybe. We might see an immediate boom, maybe a 1–2% GDP increase just from central government spending on infrastructure, extending high-speed rail, earthquake-proofing all the major cities.
We'd also see huge shifts in labor law. Japanese regulations with their strict overtime caps could finally, forcefully fix Taiwan's notorious overwork culture.
And Japan's goal of being carbon neutral by 2050 would force an aggressive green energy transition for Taiwan.
That all sounds pretty good, but we have to look at the downside of Japanese centralization.
Policy flexibility.
Exactly. Taiwan has a very flexible democratic policy environment. It can change course quickly based on elections and public opinion.
That flexibility would be replaced by Japan's centralized stability, which is often just another word for rigidity.
Look at immigration. Japan has always had extremely strict immigration laws.
And Taiwan relies on a massive Southeast Asian foreign labor population. It's up to 10% of its workforce. Many of them come in through more relaxed channels.
Under Japanese rules, a lot of those workers might find the rights weakened or get pushed into that sometimes exploitative technical intern status that's common in Japan.
Yet another thing, Taiwan is a leader in progressive social policies, especially marriage equality.
Japan is far more conservative. Low female representation in parliament, strong traditional gender roles.
So Taiwan's progressive social policies could really suffer, replaced by a more conservative, though very orderly, Japanese approach.
So the economy gets more stable and secure, but the social and policy world becomes more conservative and rigid.
Okay, let's look at the culture and identity clash. This could be tricky.
The cultural integration would probably be smooth at first, because of that high pro-Japan feeling.
Japanese pop culture would become completely local. You'd see a huge surge in Japanese language learning.
And maybe the legendary public order and cleanliness of Tokyo would be imposed on the busy streets of Taipei.
It sounds like a harmonious fusion, but this is where the identity crisis would hit hard.
Taiwan has spent decades building up a distinct Taiwanese identity movement. It's been consciously focused on de-Sinicization, on asserting its own local culture.
So losing national sovereignty to any country, even a friendly one, would trigger an immediate backlash.
The Taiwanese identity movement might just pivot to de-Japanization 2.0,
arguing that the only way to keep their true identity is through full independence, not by merging with someone else.
And let's not forget the social pressure cooker we'd be importing. Taiwan's lifestyle, especially its street culture and its more relaxed education system, is famously chill.
And that would clash violently with the high-pressure culture imported from Japan.
We're talking about the famous Japanese juku, the intense private cram school system being brought into Taiwan's schools.
Imagine a Taiwanese high school student suddenly facing that kind of relentless academic pressure.
And then after that, the demanding, hierarchical, sometimes soul-crushing karoshi, or death from overwork workplace culture.
That is a recipe for social upheaval. You're trading a relaxed, democratic energy for a highly structured, highly pressured society.
The social cost is the potential loss of that unique Taiwanese resilience and flexibility, replaced by order and repression.
Okay, now let's pivot to the other thought experiment. Let's assume Beijing gets its goal, and Taiwan is incorporated under PRC rule. Maybe as a special administrative region like Hong Kong, or just as a province.
We have to directly contrast this with the orderly, even if rigid, Japanese scenario.
And this comparison really highlights the fundamental difference between two highly developed systems, Japan and current Taiwan, and the centralized, highly political system of the PRC. The results would touch every single part of life.
Okay, first, political system and freedom. Democracy versus party rule.
In the Japanese scenario, you lose state sovereignty, but you keep democracy. You keep the rule of law and a strong democratic constitution. and you gain the world's strongest passport.
The PRC scenario means the total loss of sovereignty and democracy. Taiwan is immediately integrated into the CCP-led system. The level of personal and political freedom drops off a cliff instantly.
The loss of rule of law is the most important thing. It would be replaced by party rule.
And what does that mean in practice?
It means personal rights have no legal protection against whatever the state wants to do. If your company or your speech is seen as a threat to national security or the interests of the party, all legal protection just vanishes. There's no independent court to appeal to.
And the change in the information environment would be instantaneous.
Yeah.
And catastrophic for a free society.
Taiwan would be fully integrated into the Great Firewall. Access to global media, unrestricted financial data, which is crucial for its tech sector, and independent academic thought gets cut off.
Businesses and universities would immediately face mandatory self-censorship.
We saw this chilling effect in Hong Kong. The media and arts just stagnate, political debate disappears, and critical thinking just withers under this constant pressure of do not offend the party.
It's a transition from a high-freedom, rule-of-law society where the state serves the people to a low-freedom, party-rule society where the people serve the state.
Okay, second, economic system and risk. Capitalism versus state capitalism.
Economically, the Japanese scenario offered stability, secure capital markets, and strict, predictable rules.
The PRC scenario offers integration into the state capitalist system. State intervention is massive, it's unpredictable, and it's almost always politically motivated.
You have party committees demanding seats on corporate boards, overriding profit for political goals, and just abruptly changing the rules of the game.
This introduces a system of high risk that Taiwan's economy is simply not built for. We're talking about the vulnerability to these sudden, politically driven policy changes, like the massive crackdowns we saw in education, gaming, or the real estate sector in mainland China.
The numbers show that those political shifts have wiped out trillions of dollars in market value basically overnight.
That risk of an overnight industry disappearance is a terrifying new systemic risk for Taiwan's dynamic, export-focused economy.
And Taiwan loses its independent central bank. Monetary policy gets integrated into the renminbi, the RMB,
which exposes all of Taiwan's wealth to China's massive domestic debt crisis, its real estate instability, and its unique currency volatility.
And your assets would lack independent judicial protection against the state just deciding to take them.
And maybe the most damaging part, geopolitically. Taiwan immediately becomes a direct frontline casualty in the U.S.-China tech and trade wars.
It risks being put on international sanction lists, those infamous entity lists,
which would instantly cripple its high-tech manufacturing economy because it relies completely on unrestricted trade with Western markets.
The economic trade-off is just profound. Stable, high-cost capital under Japan versus volatile, high-risk capital under the PRC.
Okay, third, welfare and life comparison. High-quality, high-cost versus high-volume, low-quality.
We established the Japanese welfare system is high quality, standardized, but comes with a huge financial burden for the individual.
PRC welfare, while it does provide large-scale state medical insurance, is defined by uneven distribution.
Resources heavily favor the big mainland cities,
which leads to overcrowded hospitals, long wait times, and a major lack of transparency about the quality of care. Competition for good medical services is fierce, and it often depends more on who you know than what you need.
And the living environment itself changes so dramatically. Japanese society offered efficiency and order, but at the cost of personal freedom and social pressure.
PRC society introduces widespread community surveillance, a total loss of personal privacy, and the constant monitoring of your digital and physical life in exchange for neighborhood-level social stability.
So when you map out the three scenarios, Japan, PRC, and current Taiwan, the contrast is just so stark.
The PRC offers low freedom, high systemic risk, and uneven welfare. Japan offers high quality, high cost, and a conservative, restrictive social environment.
And that contrast brings us perfectly to our conclusion.
These two thought experiments, even though they're hypothetical, they are logically derived from the diplomatic claims being made by the PRC. And what they reveal is just how delicate and unique the current status quo in Taiwan really is.
I think the biggest revelation is that Taiwan's current state, this effective, democratic, and free political entity, despite its very weird international status, is economically and socially the most cost-effective choice for the people who live there.
They maintain this unique optimal balance. They avoid the cripplingly high taxes, the massive social insurance payments, and the policy rigidity of the Japanese system.
And critically, they avoid the fundamental loss of freedom, the high systemic risk of unpredictable political intervention, the loss of rule of law, and that chilling, damaging effect of self-censorship and the great firewall that's inherent in the PRC system.
Taiwan maintains its sovereign functions, including an independent central bank that can insulate its economy from regional shocks.
And maybe most importantly, it gets to keep its world-class, low-cost, high-coverage healthcare system, which is arguably better in efficiency and accessibility than either the Japanese or the PRC model.
The current status quo isn't some political accident. It represents a hard-won social and legal balance. And it was achieved through decades of democratic resilience in a brutally difficult geopolitical situation.
It really is the best combination of high freedom, functional welfare, and retained sovereignty, and it's validated over and over again by the people's actions and their votes.
That's the core takeaway from our conversation today. Our mission is always to provide objective facts and the logical consequences of those facts for discussion. We're not criticizing or taking sides with any nation, government, or people. We're simply laying out the evidence and the high-level legal analysis.
We really encourage you, our Sip&Talkers, to use this analysis of the legal black hole, the state succession fight, and these cost-benefit comparisons to foster your own critical and independent thinking on these complex global issues. The Taiwan story isn't just a diplomatic or military tale. It's a profound story about legal persistence and social choice.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us for this intense look into the legal and geopolitical paradoxes of the Taiwan Strait.
And remember to subscribe to the Sip&Talk podcast for more breakdowns of the world's most complex issues.
Also, please check out our old friend Micky's YouTube channel, Micky to Life, for some fun memes and the latest travel vlogs.
We look forward to having you join us next time for another deep conversation.
We'll see you soon.